And for more, Barin Kayaoğlu is Associate Professor of World History at the American University of Iraq, Sulaimani. He's also a non-resident fellow at the Middle East Institute, and he joins us live now from Ankara in Turkey. Now, Prof, Hezbollah has called its military operation against Israel a total success. Do you agree with this assessment, given their objectives?
Well, I don't want to validate either side's claims to military success, because what they define as military success and what I, as a former Army sergeant, a very humble former Army sergeant, would define as military success are very different things. But the point I actually want to make is that Israel and Hezbollah define success by different metrics. For Hezbollah, as an armed organization that's not necessarily an arm of a state, including Lebanon, and to a certain extent a proxy of Iran, the mere fact that it continues to exist and find supporters and, by its calculation, resist the Israeli government is more than enough success for it. And launching these 320 or so missiles at Israel, for them, is a metric of success. Now, whether that deters Israel from further attacking Hezbollah, we see that that has not been the case in the last couple of months. Earlier in the segment, your colleague mentioned how on July 30th, Israel had struck Hezbollah's top military commander in Beirut, and hours later, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. But I would also argue that for Israel, its definition of success we don't really see, because if you recall, on October 7th, after the October 7th attacks on southern Israel, the Israeli government, starting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, had defined success as the complete obliteration of Hamas. And they have in Gaza and the other parts of the occupied Palestinian territories. We have not seen that so far. So how we define success, I personally don't consider any of this a success.
And meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel will take all measures necessary to defend itself, and that he's also instructed the IDF to proactively remove the threat of Hezbollah. Now, what does that mean operationally, and what kind of response can we now expect from Israel?
It appears that Israel's definition of a sort of military achievement, an objective to accomplish, so far seems to push Hezbollah further away from Israel's northern borders, and to make sure that, to the extent that it can continue to launch missiles and rockets and projectiles and drones from southern Lebanon to Israel, it could do so further away, preferably north of the Litani River. This is about 30 to 40 kilometers, a river that cuts southern Lebanon into half, and actually cuts Lebanon into southern and central Lebanon. So Israeli military objective, operationally speaking, per the parameters of your question, appears to be to move Hezbollah further away. So far, the Israelis have not said something similar about Hezbollah as they have said about Hamas, which is the complete obliteration, the complete destruction of that organization.
And at the same time, Hezbollah has called its attack on Israel just the first phase. So can we expect more attacks? And how far would they be willing to go, short of triggering a bigger conflict?
That's a very good question, and I have to be honest with you, I do not know the answer. I'd be lying to you if I said I did. One of the things that we have heard, just a very, very quick historical recap, as a professor of history myself, in 2006, Hezbollah and Israel had fought an almost 2-month war, which ended with a political victory for Hezbollah. Per what I mentioned, they were not destroyed. And per what Israel had defined as success was to push Hezbollah further north, and they failed in that regard. But at the time, Hezbollah had maybe 15,000 crack troops, their actual professional cadres. Today, that number is believed to be 10 times more. At the time, observers thought that Hezbollah had maybe 20 to 25,000 rockets and missiles and whatnot. Today, that number ranges anywhere between 150,000 various classes of missiles and projectiles to 500,000 munitions of various classes. So whatever we see, if we do see an escalation, and I hope we don't, but if we do, then that we can bet that it will be a much bloodier and much tougher conflict than the one Israel and Hezbollah fought back in 2006.
And speaking of an escalation, now both sides are insisting they're not seeking a full-scale war, and they're mostly targeting military infrastructure at this point. But yet it really just takes a small miscalculation to cause civilian casualties or spark a wider escalation. What is the danger now of the start of a greater war in the Middle East?
No, absolutely. We're on the cusp of it, I'm afraid. Hezbollah launching a large attack on, say, a northern town like Haifa, or targeting Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and then killing civilians, that would put pressure on the Israeli government on two fronts. On the one hand, the Netanyahu government will appear like it's still not succeeding in its political objectives, which is to make Israel safer. But there will be additional pressure on Netanyahu from especially his political base and his far-right allies in cabinet to also then expand the war towards Hezbollah into Lebanon, which inevitably would drag Iran. And if it drags Iran, then it will inevitably drag the United States, which has already positioned additional military assets, naval assets, air assets, ground assets into the region.
Professor, thank you so much for your insights. That was Barin Kayaoğlu, who is Associate Professor of World History at the American University of Iraq, Sulaimani.